An icon for the city doesn't always end up being exactly what the city wants it to be. For every London Bridge and Sydney Opera House, there's a giant industrial viaduct and an old crumbling power station. These types of unconventional structures do end up becoming unofficial icons for the city. A great example of this are the Sirius apartments right next to the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They were first built as social housing, and for the longest time they were considered an eyesore. The city very nearly ended up destroying them, replacing them with something a little bit more modern, but then all of a sudden, everyone uproared. You can't destroy this icon of the city. The city listened, and now they're luxury apartments. Now, I'm not saying that this factory is going to be luxury apartments. Maybe one day, when the whole place becomes gentrified, then I can see that happening. But for now, this is a fully functional, totally custom factory. And alongside this old industrial viaduct is now, unofficially, an icon for St. Andros. So the thing is, I don't really want just to have modern industry around here. I would like this to be a bit more of a historical area as well, with some more historical industrial buildings. But we do not have anything close to historical industrial buildings in City Skylines 2, which is very unfortunate. But we do have these buildings. Now, these are apartment buildings, so this is not an ideal place for them to sit. I reckon we can make this into an old factory, but it's going to need a little bit of work, a bit of detail, and I've got a couple of ideas. Uh-oh, starting to get a little bit silly again, got something in my mind, and I can't really shake it, and this is not really working out. So, I did find this factory on Google Earth in the same spot as per usual, and it's pretty cool. You can see the shape that I'm taking inspiration from, and I think that this is sort of working, but then also not really. I am going to abandon this one. But then this one, this could work, but it will require a little bit of extra work. Now, the reason why I think it will work a whole lot better is because these are, of course, not apartment buildings, so they are not going to complain quite as much as, well, all the residents trying to live their life. I think I like the color of this brick, so I'm going to copy that and just paste it onto all of them. And then we'll just push them nice and close so that we can splice them in so it all looks like the same building. I'm going to remove this corner and this corner, and I will replace it with a slightly higher up section. The roof is way too cluttered and I think it's a bit distracting, but I reckon we can make our own roof. Now this could work. A line of pillars. I tell you what, these pillars have absolutely come in handy for covering up all sorts of bits and pieces, and that is actually not too bad. So now I've got the entire roof all covered up, I am going to use Move It to select all of these bits and pieces. Do have to be careful not to select the ones that are up here. So I'll just unselect these guys. I think that's it. And I'm missing a few, but I just want to see if this works. I'm going to press Control H and we'll line them all up. Okay, so that is pretty good. I think I might just raise it up just a smidge. Perfect. Ooh, that's good. Okay, so it is for sure pretty fiddly, and I don't know if I totally recommend it, but this is going to be a pretty good way of making a bit more of a custom roof, which I think is looking just okay. I really wish I could add a couple of decals up here just to kind of make it feel a bit more old and a bit more worn out, but I don't think I can apply any sort of decals to this particular asset, so I think it is just going to look how it is, and that's alright. And I think I'll just add in a couple of roof props, like some air conditioner units that would kind of help just to hide some of those imperfections. Now I feel like the ground floor is the part that is kind of breaking the immersion of this being an old factory. All down there looks like shops and we can't really have that. So I'm gonna try and kill two birds with one stone, and I'm gonna cover all that up by hopefully splicing in some industry. Now this will be useful. Sorry, just getting a bit lost there because that's actually not a bad look. If I just do this, and I promise I'll finish my train of thought. But I think something like this could very much work, especially if I just change the color of the walls to match what this is. Let's see if I just copy that color scheme and paste it over. Oh, now that's pretty close. Got some really fun things going on here. So I've just been splicing in a lot of these growables into this building, and I like the fact that it's a bit hodgepodge. You know, it's like it's been expanded over time. You can imagine that the old factory probably existed as a pretty different looking building to what it is today. And I am still imagining that this building is operational. In fact, this building is providing a lot of jobs. Well, not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one, not that one. Okay, so none of them. Oh man, just take my word for it. I swear there were like, there we go. There were people who were working here, but it's obviously a bit of a lack of any sort of office demand. So yeah, okay, fine. Nobody's working in those ones, but down below, the industrial side of it is absolutely thriving. Not that one, not that one, but that one. Okay? But yeah, when the city is actually doing far better and we actually have that demand, then I think that this is going to be a business that is going to, or a factory that's going to employ and very much give a lot to the city. And I reckon that is pretty cool. And it's actually starting to have a bit of a presence within the city too, which is also fabulous. So a couple of other things that's been going on, I have just been playing around with these ones down here, which I will get some trucks just to kind of like reverse into it as a bit of a loading dock. I've got a bit of a loading dock over here too, which I'm sort of imagining the entrance is, and then all this part is going to be full of shipping containers and just trucks all parked around here. I'm going to leave all this lot very open. I've also got these chimneys, which I think is probably a bit too close to that building over there, so I think I might drag them potentially here. I haven't really quite figured out where I want these to go, but I definitely want something in terms of like a chimney attached to this thing. Well, that's not too bad. I actually quite like that. And I've raised them up just so that we do have a bit of, you know, a bit of height to it. Color-wise, I've got a bit of control. That seems to be the very top of it. And this part is the base of it. And I think I prefer it to be a similar color to this. But then this top part, I think is, I reckon we just go for white just to match the rest of it. And that is pretty good. And then another really cool thing is that I can actually snap some decals to the side of this building. As you can see, we've got some worn out decals, just adding to a bit more of the grittiness to this factory. I mean, this place is pretty old and it's seen quite a lot of usage over the years. So I'm gonna go through and I reckon that this will just make it feel a bit more like a factory. Ooh, okay, and I've also just found this pack that I'm actually able to plop down some decals onto these pillars, which is just great. I'm actually thinking that I'm not going to do it on all of it, but I reckon that we might have a bit of patchwork, maybe in certain areas. Maybe they've gone through to cover up certain parts. Maybe some of the roof has been, I don't know, had a bit of work done to it. it's now about 2 weeks in the future. So just to give you a bit of context, I have just finished recording the last episode. So that might be a little bit confusing, but basically I had started to work on this bridge, and you might have noticed that previously in this episode, none of that was fully complete, but it is now. I had built all of this prior to finishing off that episode because I got very carried away doing this factory, but then realized that it didn't really fit in the last episode. So I kind of did a bit of sneaking behind the scenes, deleting some bits and pieces so people wouldn't see it. Yeah, it's been a bit of a mess, but I am pretty happy with this outcome because I am so happy with how this factory is turning out. And geez Louise, I have added in such a huge amount of detail down here, and it's all detail that I really enjoy. All this industrial open space and different ground colors and patches, and even just this road, which is seen better days. But this is going to be my favorite industrial road that I've built in City Skylines so far. I reckon the expansion joints in the middle and just kind of like doing a bit of a crisscross, and all these patches, and even just this layer of surface I have put over the top of it. It is pretty much just that grass texture, but it really does add in a lot when you get a bit closer, it looks a bit not as nice, but a little bit further away, it is totally nice. So I'm pretty happy with that. I have continued to take inspiration from this factory within New York City, and I think you can see where the similarities are. This particular factory is a bit bigger and a lot more complicated. Like, there is this whole section over here which is connected with this bridge, but how do you even make a bridge like this in City Skylines 2? It looks pretty bloody complicated and probably too much work. Just joking, I actually made it. So yeah, this is the building bridge that I have kind of like spliced in here, and I didn't record any of that footage because I honestly didn't think it was even going to work, and for the longest time, it for sure was not going to work. But hey, here we are. So it's for sure clunky and pretty silly, and you might be wondering, what on earth are we looking at here? This is, in fact, a prop. This is one of the German backyard props. It is a building, but it's technically a prop. So if I was to grab it here, and you can see what the original asset looks like, yeah, a bit different. And what I've done here is I have turned the upright snapping off and just found a spot where I can get him to flip upside down, which from memory, I think was underneath this bridge, but it was a bit clunky and kind of tricky to figure out how to even get that to work. But once I did, I just recolored him to a pretty similar color to the rest of the buildings. And here he is, just an upside down building, and I think you can probably tell. But yeah, like most things with this game, you kind of just have to use your imagination, and I think it works just fine. But I'm really glad that I did splice this building over here because it does add in a lot of extra bits and pieces. Oh dear, I need to do that back part. Ugh, that was so clunky to do in the first place. Oh well, I'll just do that in just a moment. But yeah, I feel like this is coming together pretty well, and I really like the shape of it. And of course, now that we have this guy down here, I would like to move our gas power station because I feel like he's kind of overshadowing this guy now, and I kind of want this guy to be the main focal point in terms of the buildings over on Smog Island. I think I might move this gas power station to, I don't know. And in fact, even if I wanted to move him, I couldn't. I've got no money. So maybe we should focus on that first. And I think it's gonna be pretty easy because looking at my citizen happiness, they're pretty stoked. So I think I could probably just remove some of the services that we have, or maybe just some of the funding. So things aren't looking particularly good right now, to say the least. My tactic of removing and defunding the healthcare and death care within the city has absolutely backfired. I have removed a lot of crematoriums, and I think that we are now seeing a bit of a problem because of it. So I have gone through and turned off all these warehouses because they are essentially doing nothing except for losing us money. But I'll be honest, I don't love that strategy because they're here and I feel like they need to be used. I'm going to make the most of the industry that I've already placed down and fulfill a bit of the industrial demand, which I also hope that in turn will also make us a bit of a profit. This might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm going to turn these guys back on and I'm going to splice in some industrial buildings. I've downloaded some of these block buildings and these are essentially just little cubes that you can splice into some of these other buildings that are a little bit more custom. And the way these operate are pretty interesting. They seem to be a random selection of different manufacturing buildings, which is pretty cool. They are also acting as storage, which I think fits into these warehouses. So those blocks have definitely added to the business of Smaug Island, which is great because I felt like we were really lacking a bit of action in terms of vehicles on the road, but it does look like that's starting to pick up, which is excellent. We still have a bit of industrial man, which is also pretty good because I do plan to continue to add more industry down here as we continue. But we do have a bit more money and we are making money. I am also very slowly paying off my loan. So hopefully, well, I should say my debts, but I'm not gonna do this one just yet because what I'm gonna do is I am going to move our power station to a bit of a temporary place. I don't think I'm gonna keep it over here, but it is nice and out of the way while we continue just to plan out what all of this is going to look like. And I really don't mind that sitting there, but I reckon it's just temporary for the time being because a power station could also exist over here too. So let me know where you think we should place it. We now have a bit of space here to play with, which is great because I would like to place down another unique factory and potentially take up this whole block with something dedicated, like an industrial area that is dedicated all to this area. So a pretty big chunk of industry. But the first thing I need to do is fix up my roads because they are a little bit messed up now and I don't think the blocks quite make sense. Our factory is continuing to expand. I just could not help myself. I did sort of feel like we needed a bit of an expansion. I think it's something that definitely feels realistic and probably necessary. And it really just gives it a big presence within the city. So I'm happy about that. And I also think that road-wise, it makes a bit more sense the way that it is laid out. I did drag out the highway first, which is not recommended. So I've just figured out where some of these roads sit so they're not so disrupted by this highway. But yeah, we still have one that's a little bit, we don't know where he's going. I reckon we could probably just drag another road and just call this whole section just dedicated to this factory. So I'll continue to detail and figure out how that's gonna look. But I do have something in mind that could potentially save us some money and maybe just give a bit more power to this factory. So I'm gonna drag a district around our factory and this is gonna be the perimeter of it. And I'm gonna click on it and I still don't know what the factory is all about, but I'll just give it the name factory for now. And I can already see that we have 1,300 employees, which is pretty impressive for what is a small space. So I'm pretty happy about that, but I'm gonna try and do something that could potentially add to the amount of people employed down here. So these are all offices and currently they are all unoccupied, meaning that they are just wasted. Just office buildings sitting here with absolutely no one inside. And I think they're unoccupied because, yeah, taxes for offices is just way too high. This could be dangerous, but I'm gonna lower the taxes to about 9%. And I'm just going to see if that's going to increase any of that office demand. There we go, taxes is just right. So obviously we are now taxing less to our offices, but hopefully that could mean that we will see some people actually move in here, and that would actually put these to use. So I'm just gonna leave it on fast mode. We'll just see what happens. Well, that, my friends, has worked like an absolute charm. Not only are we now making money, but I've actually got employees working here, which is great because these buildings are now not totally unoccupied. There are still a few that don't have any companies, but I reckon give it a little bit more time and we will see some more people moving in, which is awesome. So with that, I reckon it's time to continue to flesh things out and detail up more of these areas. I will disconnect a bit of this because I reckon that all of this section is now dedicated to this factory. So I am pretty keen to continue to... Should probably turn this on. I mean, they are losing me money, but it just feels a bit more realistic. So I'm gonna continue to detail it up and we'll see what else we can splice in. And I'm also pretty keen to get under here. Alright, so it's been a few days and I've just been chipping away at these blocks. And you can see there is quite a bit of detail down here, and I am keen to add a couple little bits and pieces. There's just like a few little things that I still think we can add, but as you can see, we do have a pretty good idea of the general theme for these blocks and how they're going to look. I am dedicating a lot of the industry down here to these open lots that are, you know, filled with shipping containers and trucks that have probably made their deliveries and are waiting for the next one. So that's why we've got a lot of this, and I'm gonna continue that probably all underneath this highway and probably elsewhere as well. This is the general theme for all of this area, except for the factory, of course, which is looking pretty good now that we have a bit more of storage and loading docks. You can kind of imagine how this place is used, and I think it's kind of turning out pretty well. Now, unfortunately, my parking lot is pretty empty. We just got one guy who is driving to work, and the rest of them are pretty keen to walk, which I guess I should probably be happy about, but I don't know. It just feels a bit unrealistic. So I might have to grab some sort of mod which will encourage people to drive and park, because walking around in my city is fine, but I would prefer to see people actually using the roads, because apart from a couple of trucks, this is pretty dead. So I do see more vehicles driving around here because we do have this giant factory. This is one of the unique factories, and I just felt like that was a pretty good fit for it right there. And I have spliced in the big farmer, which I do think is another good spot for it. He's all spliced in there. So we got a bit of a modern factory combo going on here, which I do love the the contrast between the two places. But we do have more truck traffic around here because, of course, that is an actual factory. Whereas around here, this is all just a bunch of props. So let's change that. I'm gonna splice in some more of these industrial cubes. These are so fantastic, and this will just add to the industry within this area, which is exactly what I want. And I can actually just go through and hide them if I kind of missed where I placed them. So I can just move those trucks like this, and this guy can kind of cover it like that. So yeah, I could go through and do that, which I might do if I am feeling super motivated. I'm gonna turn snapping off just so I have more control, and that way I can make it so that it goes all the way through this area. So I'm really happy with the fact that these now actually have some sort of purpose, and I'm gonna go through and continue to do the same treatment for the rest of the lots. Now, I reckon it's going to take a while until we actually start seeing some more traffic down here, as those factories and industrial areas are going to take a little bit of time to establish. So while we're waiting, I want to add another bit of detail, which is something that I always harp on about, and that is power lines. In an industrial area like this, you're going to see tons and tons of power lines. These factories do take up a lot of energy. You know, if this was a residential neighborhood, then power lines like this would not be as welcome. But within an industrial zone, then I don't think people are going to care quite as much. And just for a little bit of extra realism, I might even drag a few of them inside the building just to show that they are in fact connected. Yeah, I am a huge fan of that. I reckon power lines are super underrated in this game, not in real life. And they're probably not underrated, but just don't get enough credit. I reckon the fact that they just sway ever so slightly, the fact that they add that extra layer on top of your city, and I mean, in a physical sense, the fact that we actually have this, you know, these poles sticking up and these wires overhead, it's the same reason why I do tend to build a lot of elevated highways and train lines within my cities. It's because I am trying to play around with the different layers within a city, and a power line, a bunch of power lines, definitely adds to that. Alright, while we're talking about a highway, I am putting something off. Big time. I am putting off the underpass. All of this undersection of this highway, I do still need to detail it up. And it's not really that I'm putting off, it's the thing that I have to do first. And you're not gonna like it, but I'm about to make a really big change. I know, this is just such a silly move, but once I get something in my head, I really just can't shake it. And I reckon this is going to be visually way cooler. And practically, it's probably going to make a bit more sense. So essentially, I have taken the connection to this elevated section. I'm changing it from over here to over here, where the bridge is, and I'm doing that. First, visually, it's going to be pretty cool seeing this underpass, well, this underneath section that's going to go under here. And this ramp is now, rather than doing a bit of a swoopy motion here, instead it's just going to connect straight up to this section. But yeah, it is a major deal to be changing this, and I still don't even know if it's going to be totally worth it. But I'm going to spare you all of the little bits of detail. I'll include a little bit, but I'm just going to fly through this, even though I know it's going to take a long time. And I'll see you in just a moment. Alright, well, I was mistaken. That is definitely taken quite some time to re-drag out and detail up, and I've definitely probably gone to more detail than I needed to, but I really just got lost in all of it, and it's been about, I don't know, a week or so of just on and off detailing and building and just getting into all the nitty-gritty, but man, I have had so much fun trying to figure out all of this, and I am just gonna fly around and show you a bunch of it because I really just shot through all of it. So, as you can see, we now have our connection pretty much connecting up to that bridge. It goes all through this underpart, and I am a huge fan. So the thing that's probably taken the longest is trying to just make this as smooth as possible, and it is for sure not massively smooth. Like, it could be way better, and I've just noticed something that is so frustrating. But I've spent ages and ages trying to make sure that essentially See how we have this side of the highway as it kind of comes off the bridge. All this traffic, well, the 2 lanes of traffic go along this section, whereas over here, this lane has to merge, which is not great. But I tell you what, I am not going to change it. That is just one of those things that is just going to have to stay like that. I mean, this bridge has got a whole bunch of quirks and bits and pieces that are probably a little bit too dangerous. It is old school, and that is definitely pretty old school. So yeah, I am fully aware of that. Unfortunately, that is just gonna have to stay because the amount of time that I've had to spend just with all of the nodes in Move It, trying to get all of it to just be a little bit more smoother. This is probably about as good as it's gonna get. Sorry, I'm just gonna get rid of this guy. Yeah, as you can see, I have gone through and added even the lights back. I really liked that aspect of it the first time, so I did want to go back and add those bits and pieces. I have also added in some barrels around here, and I've like tried to, it's been really tricky to do it, but I also wanted to make one of those, I don't even know what it's called, but one of those barriers that is a bit of a safety barrier. If I could, I would make that inside line yellow, just so it matched with this highway as the ramp goes through the bridge, but I don't really know how I can do that besides dragging out some sort of decal, and the decals really just don't work on elevated sections, so that is pretty much as good as I'm gonna get it. If you've got any ideas, please let me know, but I am pretty stoked with how all this looks. I've also gone through and added in some extra beams and bits and pieces on our bridge. These are shipping containers, just change the color, of course, and that works pretty well. But I really love these little pillars poking through. I just think they add a bit of detail and just make it all feel a little bit more unique. So I am pretty happy with that, and I've definitely played with it over here a bit more by adding in some extra little bits and pieces. And all this crossbeam, huge fan. Like, I really love these sort of areas, and I like the fact that we've got this big, thicker piece in the middle, which just adds to it all. So really happy with that. I feel like that is all working splendidly. I've also gone through and continued the same, what even this is, an open container. Yeah, so I've continued that. If you saw the last episode, we now have all these nice, big, thick pillars that are supporting all of it. So I really feel like that works quite well. And I've even gone through and added an extra layer of shipping containers underneath just to support it all up. And I was not going to do that, but I reckon that is totally worth it. I think this particular spot is becoming one of my favorites just because you do have the bridge in the distance and then all the traffic using that elevated highway, and then all the bits and bobs down below. I am really loving all of it. And it is just great seeing people actually use this space because I have spliced in a whole bunch of those industrial blocks. So pretty much every single lot, apart from this one, which is abandoned, every other lot is totally functional. So that is why we are seeing, I reckon, a good amount of traffic. Once again, we don't have a huge amount of people using my parking lots, which is a bit of a shame because I don't really understand how people are getting here. Like, there are still people on foot. I don't really know why they're on foot because we do have enough infrastructure for people to drive to work and then use these parking lots. So it is a bit of a shame, but a parking lot is here. We then have all these lots below this elevated section, and I did go through and just recolor all of these containers just so we had a bit of variation because you don't really see this sort of color if you are just placing down manually. Instead, you have to go through and change all that color, which I think is totally worth it. And then for all this section, I did this really fun thing where we actually had a road that was connected, but I mean, you probably noticed that this pillar was blocking the way and was, you know, definitely not okay. So what I've done instead is I've just disconnected it. We don't really need it. I mean, this road is pretty much just dedicated to that factory, and this factory has been here for a while. I reckon longer than this highway. So I think that at some stage, yeah, this was connected. And I reckon that people were probably once driving between here. They've got these concrete barriers here now to stop people from doing it, but you can see a bit of that gravel and the roughness where people have been driving, and probably just some leftover bits and pieces, and maybe just some leftover concrete from where that road sat, and I am really happy with that. I feel like that worked out really well. And then that is essentially it. That's what I've been doing over the last week or so, just quite a lot of detail, and it's just been so much fun. But there are just a couple of other little bits and pieces that I do want to try. So over here, I have just been playing around with an idea, and I'm not quite sure if it's going to work. What I want is, I wouldn't mind there to be some sort of, I don't know, like support something here. I feel like something needs to sit below this little section, and what I did was I just dragged out a network and then pretty much aligned it up and then dragged them over here. And then I've just placed these supports, and I don't know if they're going to totally work. They could potentially be overkill, but what I'm hoping is if I select props with move it and then drag out like this. So now I am really hoping that I've gotten my measurements somewhat right. Geez, this would be nice if it works. And I think it actually might work. Okay, that looks like it's all aligned up, and interesting. It's probably a bit much, and I would prefer it if it was more like this. If you're wondering why I haven't used this pillar in the first place, I can't get it on that angle and it doesn't quite look right, so I've just gone for that instead. And look, I don't mind it. It's a bit unique, a bit different. I'll leave it for now. What do you reckon? And while we're adding little bits of detail, there is one more little bit of detail that I still need to add. Welcome to Smog Island. What do you reckon? So this was a decal that I created. I have had major assistance from Sully, so shout out to Sully for his help with putting this together. He gave me a great little tutorial on how to do it, and I tell you what, it's actually way easier than I ever could have imagined. I've had a lot of fun just working on some decals and some graffiti and thinking about where they could go within the city, but this was the very first one, and I feel like this turned out great. But this was the first one that I've done, and stay tuned for a whole lot more. But I do think that this is a pretty good spot for it, a bit of an unofficial welcome to Smog Island, and I'm not really quite sure how these guys managed to tag up here because it is pretty high up, and not only that, it looks a little bit dangerous. So I might have to actually fix up a couple of things. Maybe a couple of crates could be of assistance, and I'm pretty sure we do have a ladder that I could just slap down, and yep, here we go. But this does look like a bit of a popular graffiti spot, so I'm going to do a few more and maybe some more just slightly less impressive tags just around the wall. And in terms of the story of Smog Island, as you can see, I have named this place Smaug Industries. So this whole industrial factory complex, which is now, wow, that's a lot of workers. Great, over 3,000. Yeah, this is Smaug Industries. And I'm gonna be calling this entire industrial area Smog Island, but spelt like this. And then unofficially, just like our tag, it's gonna be known as Smog Island. Now, I don't think I've come up with that idea. I'm pretty sure I read that in the comments quite a while ago. So if that is an idea from you, I'm sorry, I'm not taking credit for it. I think it's kind of cool to have two names, both sounding exactly the same, an official name and then an unofficial name. And what do you think Smaug Industries is all about? Because at the moment, this is just a generic factory. But it'd be kind of cool to give this factory a bit of a purpose, being such a huge presence within the city. So if you've got any ideas, let me know, and we might even create some sort of custom sign, which would be kind of cool to sit on the front of it. And I reckon we'll probably finish off the majority of the industrial side of Smog Island in the next episode. There are a couple of smaller little builds that I wouldn't mind getting to, but I'll probably leave them for a later date. I will talk a bit more about them a bit later, but in terms of fleshing out some of these other blocks, which you can see them starting to take shape, yeah, I've got a bit of an idea of what I'm going to be building there. And for those of you who are wondering about this very random dirt road, well, that is a story for the next episode. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of San Andros. It is always very much appreciated, and I do hope you've enjoyed this one. I think I put in maybe double the amount of hours than I usually do for this episode, just because I've gotten so lost in all of it, just so much detailing, and of course going over old ground, which did take up quite a bit of time, but totally worth it in my opinion. I think that it turned out pretty fun. And speaking of fun, the next episode is going to be a lot of fun. It is being very much long requested, so I do hope you will join me for that episode. But until then, have a great week, and a big shout out to my beloved YouTube members and patrons for making videos like this possible. The Bolt Scoots, Up the Rabbitohs, KPen97, Chukek Wolfgang, Homemade Cook, Bravid, Nelzinga, Cooney, Moity, Nate Dalton, and Bud Causey. Cheers, legends. Catch you on the next one. Bye.